Okay, so now comes the elephant in the room, the PhD. A PhD is a big commitment, and I found this funny comic on the right that compares a PhD to a marriage. So, the typical length of a marriage is 7.5 years in Western countries. In India, it's like several decades. And a PhD is 7 years, so pretty similar. Uh, a marriage begins with a proposal, a PhD begins with a thesis proposal. And there's a ceremony where you walk down in fancy clothes, so that's for your marriage. And in the PhD, it's like your graduation. And yeah, you get the gist. So basically, a PhD is a huge commitment, and it's kind of like a very intimate and close relationship with your PhD supervisor. So it can last anywhere between 4 to 7 years long. So it's like you were a student in school, then you were a student in college, and then you're a student for 7 years. So keep that in mind. So, one good thing about a PhD, and personally, what motivated me to do a PhD was the amount of intellectual freedom. So, in a PhD, you and your supervisor will together discuss and come up with what you want to work on. So, you don't get that in a lot of fields. So, suppose you go for a job after your college degree, you might have a set of predefined tasks that you have to work on or predefined projects that you have to work on. In a PhD, on the other hand, if you have a good supervisor, you can actually together come up with what you want to work on. You can work on questions that you actually want to know the answers to. So I think that's really great. There are also downsides to that, I have to say. So the kind of system we are till college is very different from the system that you will be put into if you do a PhD. So in college you need to take courses. There are predefined number of credits that you have to complete. There's a predefined project that you have to do. But in a PhD there's a lot of flexibility, and it takes some getting used to after uh, the college system. PhDs, like in many other fields, give you ample opportunities to network, meet other like minded people working on fields that are interesting to you, and also a lot of discussions with them to come up with new ideas. A PhD is very different from a 9 to 5 job in that if you're doing experiments, for example, your experiment might go on for several hours into the night and you might have to stay in the lab. So your timings might not be very fixed. And you would have to work a lot on some days, you would have no work on other days. So for example, I was supposed to go to Brazil to collect some data this summer, but that didn't happen. So I've just been stuck at home working on data projects all summer. So that can happen. It's not a 9 to 5 job, so keep that in mind. Also consider the pay scale. So if you're doing a PhD, your friends from college will be earning several times more than you, and sometimes that might make you feel bad. So only do a PhD if you're really, really passionate about it and you're sure that research is what you want to do. So typically, graduate students are not paid that much compared to people of similar ages working in other fields. So if you compare the salary of, say, a software employee versus a graduate student in both India and abroad, it will be very, very different. So keep that in mind. A PhD is great, but there are some things that you have to seriously consider before going into it. Shall we move on? Is there
Yeah.
anything else?
One more thing, they wanted to like kind of like ask you a question.
Sure.
So they are asking, why didn't you opt out Indian universities for your PhD? And then why did you like kind of like move out? And then like what made you go there? That is one thing that they have asked. And the second question is like, I'm an average student who's
Mhm.
like very good. I mean, like who likes biology.
Okay.
I mean, if not KVPY and IISC, what am I to do? Which local universities like can I join? I mean, like will a student from a local university will be able to do projects abroad?
Okay.
Two
So
questions.
sure. So, answer to question one, it's not that India is any less than foreign universities. It actually depends on the field. So, for some fields, there are some great labs in India and there are some great labs abroad. So, that is one thing you have to consider when deciding where you want to do your PhD. So, I personally chose to apply abroad because ecology is not a very common field, and very few universities in India have an ecology department, and IISc is one of those few. And I had already worked there, and I felt like I had worked under three professors in the same department. So I wanted a change of environment, which is why I primarily applied abroad. But this is not so for other fields. So maybe things that are biotech oriented or molecular biology oriented. I'm not an expert on other fields, but I'm sure there are some great labs in India too. So ultimately, it depends on what field you're interested in and what labs in India or abroad are doing the kind of research that you want to do. That is what should motivate your decision on India versus abroad, or this university in India versus that university, and the same abroad. As for question two, uh, I want to say that the journey towards your career goal is something you should take at your own pace. So don't think you're average or anything. Try to get through KVPY. KVPY is great, but if you think it's very difficult, then don't feel bad. You won't fall back. I know a lot of friends who did like a BTech in biotechnology in private universities in India, so you can do that. And then you can maybe be an RA, a research assistant, as I said before. That will give you some research experience and maybe also a recommendation. And using that research experience and what you did in your college, you can actually contact professors and apply for PhD. So KVPY is not the only route, and I want to emphasize this. You can pursue a biotech degree from any private college as long as you have good research experience and good recommendations. If you have publications, that's amazing. Like publications are really good if you have them by the end of college, but you don't have to graduate from an IISc or an IISER to do a PhD in a good university, India or abroad. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. So I mean, like, what sort of courses can they take? I mean, like, people who are not getting into IISc. I mean, like, what sort of courses they can take, and then how can you define for biology students? What options do you have? Like, would you suggest taking up biotechnology or like individual fields, or like would you ask them to go on a very basic level, basic sciences? Which one do you
So,
suggest?
personally, I would not recommend doing a 3-year BSc in whatever subject. Maybe a BTech would be a better option in biotech or something like that.
Okay.
So that way, so usually BTechs require you to do some internships and things like that. And if you do serious research work during your college, you can pretty much get into any good university with research experience and recommendations. So I think if you do a BTech, they have like a mandatory internship component where you might actually be able to do some hands-on work, and with this you can make your application better. So uh, I'm not the expert, but personally, I would recommend not doing a 3-year BSc, but doing like maybe a BTech in biotechnology or something like that.
Okay, and wait a minute. So there is like one more question. Just a
Yeah,
second.
sure.
So there are people interested to know the monetary part of like what do they get a PhD person who's like kind of like entering into PhD. What sort of stipend will he get? I mean, people are more bothered about the monetary part also. Like, can you
Yeah,
just
no, I completely understand. Money is important. So, in IISc, I think a PhD student, when I was studying there, was getting around 25K, but there was a strike, I think, 2 years ago, and I think it went up to 30K or something per month.
okay,
So, if you live in IISc, typically your um, monthly hostel and mess expenses will come to maximum 5,000. So, if you get 25 or 30,000 a month, you will still be able to save a little bit. Um, the pay, I think, is slightly better in a foreign. So Europe pays really well. So comparatively, doing a PhD in Europe, if money is an important concern for you, doing a PhD in Europe is great because they pay quite handsomely. So a friend of mine got a PhD in Germany, and it's not even his full salary, but he got 85,000 rupees a month or something. And like, he'll probably get more, double that. So Europe pays pretty well. US and Canada, not so much. So I think US will pay you like around 30,000, 25 to $30,000 a year. So typically, PhD students will also not have to pay tuition. The department will pay their tuition. So you won't have any expense. You won't be spending anything from your pocket. And maybe you can save a little bit, but not too much. I get around 29 to 30,000 Canadian dollars a year. So yeah, the like compared to say somebody who works in a software company, it's not a lot, but if you can live frugally, then you can have some savings.
Okay, so one more question. What are the sacrifices that you made to get into, I mean, IISC kind of thing? I mean, like, what did you like really lose, or like, what are the things that you have like missed out?
Personally, my goal at the end of 11th and 12th was to get into ISC or an ICER, and I think I got there, so that was good for me. Uh, I don't think I lost out personally, but I do feel that some people have to make tough choices between attending, say, like an engineering college like an IIT versus ISC, or like so I had a student talk to me about whether he should go to Jipmer or come to ISC since he had cleared KVPY. And he ended up going to Jipmer. So ultimately, it depends on what you really want to do. So if you think medicine is your true calling, then go ahead. It's fine. You can just say, oh, KVPY is this huge exam and I still cleared it, and that would still count.
Good. So you have like kind of like the thing. It's indeed like good to have you here, Pooja. It's like almost time for you, and we think it's like it should be 1:30 now. So I think we
Ah,
don't
no.
like, keep you further awake. So thanks for joining us. If you have like any few words that you want to like communicate to the students, like you can tell it, and then like we can wrap up the course. That's it.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I think I talked about most of this. I've also sent these slides to ma'am in case you want to know more. So, there's a little about how to apply for graduate school. So, as I told you, your CV is very important. And these are some things that you would need to put in your CV. And I think you can share these slides in case you guys have further questions. One important thing is the SOP or the statement of purpose. And this is where you say why you want to do the research you want to do, who you want to work under, and what experiences in your life motivated you to take this choice. So that's a very important part of your application if you're trying to go abroad. Yeah, and then letters of recommendation. Some universities also require you to take exams like the GRE and English exams like the TOEFL and IELTS. So that was something I wanted to say. It was not important. Oh, yeah. So if you guys are wondering what to do after doing a PhD, there are a lot of opportunities, and the number of opportunities are growing. So you can go the traditional way. You can do a postdoc or multiple postdocs and try to become a professor somewhere and start your own lab. Alternately, you can become a lab manager. A lab manager is like a Superman technician who manages everything in the lab. They order supplies, they make sure the equipment is working fine. They're basically like a trained, skilled research assistant to the professor. You can also be a scientist with various government organizations, like, I don't know, maybe like the WHO or things like that, or even private organizations like pharmaceutical companies that are trying to do research on new drugs. You can also work in the industry, and this is especially relevant if you're an engineer. So you can do research for companies. You can also do something that's less conventional, such as science communication and journalism. So these are some career opportunities after a PhD. So a few words of advice before I sign off. Work-life balance is really important. A lot of us want to just work hard and get where we want to go, but don't give up making friends, don't give up your hobbies, don't give up any of your personal pursuits. That's very important. especially if you're doing something like a PhD, which is a long drawn out process. It's very important to keep in touch with your other pursuits. In general, be inquisitive. If you're stuck somewhere, don't be afraid to ask questions, and communicate with your superiors, with your peers, with your colleagues. Make sure you're discussing what's going on. Uh, if you're having an issue, don't struggle, don't suffer silently. Talk to people about it and sort it out. Um, and it's okay if your interests change with time. So I had friends who started off wanting to do astrophysics, and then they went on to do like a biology major and completely changed track. So it's totally fine for that to happen. Don't worry if your interests change with time. So yeah, that I think sums it up. So that was all I wanted to say. And I put this comic that says, I've concluded that you're wonderful. You're all wonderful. I'm sure you'll all do great, and best of luck.
Thank you, Pooja. It's indeed good to have you back here. And then like we are like very happy that one of our students has reached great pinnacles of glory. So I mean like all the best for your career, and then like all the best wishes for your future endeavors. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. And if you have any further questions, you can share my email ID with students and they can get in touch if
Sure,
necessary.
I'll do that thing. I mean, I'll just pass it on to them.
Okay,
Thank you very much for joining us.
awesome. Thanks.
Good night for you.
Bye.
Okay, so children, you have one more session today as part of this career talk. We have one Mr. Karthikeyan who will be joining us. It's at 12:30, the usual regular time that we will be like having. Okay, so please join us for that particular session also. I hope it would be useful. Thanks for joining us. Same link, yeah, it is the same link. Thank you very much. Yes, another system, another time like it's at 12:30. You have one more session. Children, please do join for that also and get information about your career thing. So one more session is from a student who passed out from NIT. So we would be like having a talk with them also today. Thank you.